Good morning, Isaac. 2017 has come and gone, and 2018 is here, and we begin our course again of Doctrine Made Simple. And for the beginning of this year, we're going to do a course that we've called Baptist Distinctives and Beliefs. We need to understand that every religion has their own distinctive beliefs that encompass what they believe and practice and distinguishes them from all others. And if they didn't have their distinctives, they wouldn't actually exist. They exist because there are things that they believe and things that they practice that make them different to all others. Every denomination within so-called Christianity also has their own distinctives that are the very reason that they exist. When we don't have any distinctives, it means we're just the same as everybody else, so we're no different, so we wouldn't be a separate group, would we? Within so-called Christianity, there are literally hundreds of groups. Some are big groups, denominations. From every denomination there's little splinter groups. There are cults who believe they're the only ones that are right. There are sects, all sorts of groups. And they all have beliefs and practices that are peculiar to them and distinguish them from others. If they didn't, they wouldn't be a separate group. Now, the first aspect of this subject that we must understand is that it's not every individual distinctive that defines each group. It's a combination of the distinctives. Amongst the groups, there are quite a few things that they would call distinctives, and we as Baptists would call distinctives, that are not exclusive to us at all, right? Because it's not every individual distinctive that defines each group. It's a combination of the distinctives. Individual distinctives may be common to many of the groups, and these give common ground between these groups. Particularly, I'll just name you a couple of groups, the Church of Christ and the Baptists. There's a lot of things that are the same in those two groups. Many of the Brethren churches and the Baptists, there's a lot of things that are the same, but they're not the same group because there are distinctives that separate them, and it is a combination of the distinctives that make the difference. Right, so when there's common ground between these groups, it doesn't, however, mean that these groups are the same or that they can join together. The distinctives that are not common to them mean that the groups don't join together. Now you might think, oh, there's only this one thing that's distinctive between these two groups. So they could probably get together and coexist together and work together successfully. Well, you would be wrong if you think this. It's been tried many, many times throughout history, and the distinctives are what make them distinctive. Right. Christianity is different from all other religions in the world in this respect. The strength of Christianity is in its diversity, and we need to understand that right from the start. Every other religion would be inclined to say, united we stand and divided we fall. But for Christianity, we understand that the opposite is true. Divided we stand and united we fall. And you say, well, how can that be? Well, we need to understand it's not a bad thing that Christianity has so many different groups involved and so many different distinctives. It's actually a good thing, and this fact has been demonstrated many times throughout history, and certainly in my lifetime I've seen this over and over. When one group loses its way, another group steps up and makes a stand, and Christianity just keeps on growing. Now, if we were just one big group, once they'd lost their way, Christianity would have lost its way, but it doesn't work like that. And so it's a benefit to Christianity that we have diversity. Now, the second aspect of this subject that we must understand is that within Christianity, it is the distinctives that have divided us. When a group of people within, say, a denomination have been convicted about something to the point where they cannot in good conscience stay within that group, then they have separated and they've formed another group. This has historically happened over and over, and we would say, oh dear, Christianity is splitting up all the time. Well, let's understand that this isn't to our disadvantage, this is to our advantage. It's like an army where you have an extra platoon that does something different to the others. And so it gives us added strength. It doesn't take away the strength of Christianity. This process has served Christianity well over the centuries, and we can look back in history, see it happening over and over, right from the early church, and we see that it hasn't been a curse, it's been a blessing. Right, we need to understand that there are more people alive today who are truly born-again Christians than there have been from the formation of the church on the day of Pentecost 2,000 years ago up to this time in history. Now, if it didn't work in practice, then we would have died out, because Christianity only exists from one generation to the next. And we need to understand that if we get it wrong for one generation, Christianity dies out in that area. And yet, after 2,000 years, there are more Christians alive today than there has been all through history up to today. Then there's a third aspect of this subject that we do well to look at here. Within so-called Christianity, and it's the same within every other religion as well, of course, since the day of Pentecost, many of the people who have been part of the Christian church, and indeed many of the leaders of the so-called Christian church, have not truly been Christian at all. Now, it's the same in every religion. Many of the people that head up these religions are there because there's a benefit to them, either in financially or in prestige or in power, and so they're not what they claim to be. And Christianity is notorious for this. And it's true right up to this present day. One only has to watch the news on TV to see the pedophilia and the immorality that has riddled the modern-day Roman Catholic Church. And we understand that there's many of these people who are not truly Christian at all. One only has to look back at the postal ballot on the same-sex marriage to remember that many so-called Christians voted to legalise the sin that God calls an abomination. Now, that's what Christianity has come to in our country. So many of the people who call themselves Christians in Australia today, we need to understand that the Christian church is not totally, certainly not totally, but in general, apostate. And you say, oh dear, apostate, what's that? Well, it simply means this, that we've departed from our foundational beliefs, right? And think about that. Think about what you know of churches and people who are in churches in Australia today and ask yourself, have they departed from their foundational beliefs or not? And ask yourself the same question about yourself. And I ask myself the same question about myself. Have we departed from our foundational beliefs? And if we have, we are what we call apostate. Now, many of the people in our churches are apostate. Many of them don't even know what their foundational beliefs are. Within the different groups, there are people who are truly Christians in the fact that they have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ and they believe the Bible to be the final authority in all matters of faith and practice. But many people who attend church on Sundays, and this isn't just in the Baptists, it's in all the different denominations, and these people would say that they are Christians, but they live like as if they are not Christians. If they had to be convicted of being a Christian, for many people there wouldn't be enough evidence to bring a conviction against them. And this is the state that we call apostasy. And the Australian churches, Christian churches, many of the people who attend them could not tell you what they believe or why they believe it. Very few people in any of the denominations of Christianity in Australia today could give a clear account of their beliefs and their distinctives, or explain why they matter and where they came from. Now that's the truth of the matter. In fact, very few denominations in Australia today actually practice their distinctives, and indeed, if we were given a list of their distinctives and asked to identify the particular group by their distinctives, we would be unable to do so. And as we study Baptist distinctives, you'll look at the Baptist denomination and ask yourself the question, where are they in regard to their distinctives and beliefs? In this particular course, we are going to study Baptist distinctives. I personally am a Baptist, and I'm a Baptist by conviction. So in this course, I identify with Baptist distinctives and use the personal pronoun throughout these lectures. The distinctives I present as Baptist distinctives are those that I was taught from my earliest childhood. They originated for me as I grew up in the Baptist Union of New South Wales, and they were the distinctives that the Baptist Union of Australia, of which New South Wales was then the only representative, presented in 1901 and 1902 as the basis on which the Baptist Union of Australia was to be founded. I didn't just make these up myself. They were what I was taught as I grew up. The people that taught them didn't just make them up. They were what the Baptist Union presented to base the Baptist Union of Australia on when they founded the Baptist Union of Australia. Up until the early 1960s, they were commonly taught from our pulpits and in our Sunday schools. I was taught them in church. As a child, I memorised them, along with all the other members of my family, and by the time I was 10 years old, I could quote them and understand them. For many years, I have sought to teach them and to ensure that we, as Baptists, understand and practice those beliefs that are the foundations of our faith. Since the 1970s, there has been a continuing and growing disregard by Baptists of our distinctives and many churches that use the name Baptist no longer could be recognised as Baptist if these distinctives were applied. It is my strong conviction that we as Baptists need to get back to the foundations on which we first so successfully built, to understand where we came from and to reevaluate where we have come to. So let's have a look at our notes now. Lesson 1, Baptist Distinctives and Beliefs.